My son Michael texted me happy birthday 3 days late asking why I hadn't reminded him. I blocked his access to the family trust fund that same afternoon. By midnight, he'd called 47 times begging me to answer the phone. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me tell you how we got to this point, because the devil's in the details, and this devil doesn't just whisper, it bites. 3 months earlier, I was what you might call a devoted mother. No, more like a bank account with legs. At 68, I'd been paying for my adult children's lifestyles for so many years that I honestly forgot what boundaries felt like. When my husband Robert passed 5 years ago, he left enough money to keep us secure. Secure enough that Michael and his wife Nora could have their perfect Westchester home, private schooling for their kids, and Nora's endless shopping habits. Meanwhile, I stayed in the Park Avenue apartment Robert and I had shared for 3 decades, quietly writing checks. Every Sunday I drove to their place for dinner. Every holiday I pulled out my pen. Every celebration, birthdays, weddings, graduations, I gave without question. I believed I was showing love. In truth, I was just allowing myself to be used. The warning signs were right in front of me. Michael only called if he wanted something. Nora barely acknowledged me, her face buried in her phone or focused on the next renovation. My grandchildren, Emma and Jake, ages 12 and 14, were polite but detached, treating me like an obligation. And I turned a blind eye, convinced that family meant loyalty, that love meant sacrifice, that if I just kept giving, someday they would appreciate me. How wrong I was. The day before my birthday, I went shopping for ingredients to bake Michael's favorite chocolate cake, the one I'd been making since he was 5. My hands, stiff with arthritis, made mixing a challenge, but I pressed on, thinking it would remind him of his mother's love, and that morning I sent him a quick message. "Cake's ready whenever you want to stop by." He never replied. I waited. Every car that passed made me glance out the window for his silver BMW. Every buzz of my phone made my heart jump, hoping it was him. But morning stretched into afternoon slipped into night, and still, nothing. That cake sat untouched for 3 days, going stale just like my patience. On the 4th day, I scraped it into the sink, holding back tears as I destroyed the recipe Robert had loved so much. That was the moment I finally admitted it. My son hadn't just been late, he had completely forgotten my birthday. After all I had done, helping him through his divorce, paying for his honeymoon, even covering a $200,000 down payment on his house, this was my reward. Silence. Then, as I poured my second cup of coffee on day 4, my phone lit up with his name. My foolish heart leapt until I read the words, "Hey Mom, happy birthday. Sorry it's late. You should have reminded me." I should have reminded him like I was some random acquaintance instead of the woman who'd carried him for 9 months, who'd walked the floors with him during colicky nights, who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for his college education. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The Dorothy who used to answer with a soft apology and a forgiving smile would have typed something kind. "Oh, darling, don't worry. These things happen." She would have made excuses for him, probably invited him over that night to make up for his forgetfulness. But that Dorothy had disappeared sometime between throwing away the stale cake and reading his limp non-apology. Instead of composing another excuse, I reached for the phone and called my lawyer. "Dorothy, James Richardson had been our family attorney for 15 years. What can I do for you today?" "I need to change the trust distributions," I said, steadier than I felt. "How quickly can you do that?" There was a pause. He knew exactly which transfers I meant. He'd been the one to set up those monthly payments when Robert died. "May I ask what prompted this?" he asked. I could have laughed aloud. What prompted it? 2 decades of being taken for granted. A birthday tossed aside like yesterday's garbage. A casual text that treated me like an inconvenience. "Let's say I've reconsidered my obligations," I said. James moved faster than I expected. By Tuesday afternoon, the automatic disbursements to Michael's accounts were suspended. The monthly wire that covered mortgage Car payments and Nora's credit cards simply stopped. I didn't tell them. Why would I? They'd never asked where the money came from, never once wondered if I could afford their lifestyle, never said thank you for bankrolling their American dream. For once, I kept my mouth shut and watched. And you know what? The feeling of holding the power, of finally being the one to decide, was nearly intoxicating. For the first time in years, I wasn't folding. I was the one with all the cards. It took 6 days. I was curled up in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea, enjoying the rare peace of my own company, when the phone began to ring. Michael's name flashed. I let it go to voicemail. He rang again and again. By the 4th call, I was amused. Where had this urgency been when he forgot my birthday? The 5th call came with a text. "Mom, please pick up. There's been a mistake with the bank." Mistake, he called it. The gravy train had derailed, and I poured myself a small glass of wine and sat back. Let him worry for a while. I'd sweated and fretted for decades over whether I was doing enough, giving enough, being enough. Let him feel some of that unease. The calls escalated, 7, 8, 9, each one more frantic than the last. By nightfall, Michael had called 23 times. Nora had phoned 6. They left 14 voicemails in total. The first few were puzzled. "Mom, I think there's been a banking error. Can you call me?" By the 7th message, confusion had turned to concern. "Mom, please call us." The mortgage bounced. By message 12, worry had become full panic. "Dorothy, this is Nora. We need to talk now." The final voicemail, left at 11:47 p.m., was raw and pleading. Michael's voice cracked with exhaustion. "Mom, I know you're angry about the birthday. I'm sorry, but this isn't funny anymore. Please call us back. We need that money. We need that money." Perfect. After all these years, he finally admitted what I'd been to them. I turned my phone off and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, at 7:30 a.m., someone started pounding on my apartment door. I dressed slowly, comfortable sweater, pearls, and took my time, because if Michael and Nora wanted a confrontation, I intended to meet it with dignity. I peered through the peephole and saw them in the hallway, disheveled and desperate. Michael was pacing, running his hands through his hair. Nora stood stiffly, clutching her designer purse as if it were armor. I opened the door with a calm smile. "Good morning, dear. What brings you here so early?" Michael stormed past me into the apartment, with Nora trailing close behind, her expression thunderous. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Michael demanded. "The bank says all transfers from your accounts have stopped. Our mortgage payment bounced, the car payments bounced, and Nora's credit cards have been declined." I shut the door and turned to face them. They looked frantic, shaken, like children suddenly realizing the world didn't bend to their every need. "Would you like some coffee?" I asked sweetly. "We don't want coffee," Nora snapped. "We want to know why you've cut off our money without telling us." Our money. How curious, I thought, that she believed funds I'd earned, inherited, and managed belonged to her by right. Without rushing, I walked into the kitchen, measured out the coffee grounds, filled the pot, and let them sit there while I worked at my own pace. "I've been reflecting," I said evenly, "on family, on responsibility, on basic courtesy, like remembering important dates." Michael's face flickered with guilt. "Mom, if this is about your birthday—" "Oh, it's about far more than that," I cut in. "Your birthday slip-up was only the last straw. Do you know how long it's been since either of you asked me how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, if I need anything?" Their silence was answer enough. 14 months, I told them. 14 months since either of you treated me as anything other than a bank account. Nora flushed red and stepped forward. "That's not fair. We invite you to family dinners. You invite me to dinners where I sit quietly while you chatter about renovations I pay for, vacations I fund, and schools I subsidize. I'm not a guest at those dinners, Nora. I'm the sideshow. The old lady tolerated because she writes the checks." The room went quiet, the kind of silence that stretches wide and heavy. Michael sank onto the couch, the fight draining out of him as he realized I wasn't bluffing. "Mom," he said softly, "I know we haven't been very attentive, but cutting us off completely, isn't that a little extreme?" I raised an eyebrow. Extreme? From the man who forgot his own mother's birthday and then blamed me for not reminding him? I crossed to my desk, pulled out a folder, and set it down with precision. "Let me give you perspective. In the 5 years since your father passed, I've given your family $847,000 in direct transfers. That doesn't include holidays, gifts, or the $200,000 down payment for your house. Just regular support. Nearly $1 million. Nora went pale. I doubted she'd ever tallied it up. "In exchange," I went on, "you've visited me 32 times. That averages out to about $26,000 per visit. I've attended 14 family gatherings where I was treated as an afterthought, about $60,000 per occasion of being ignored. And you, Michael, you've called me 7 times in 5 years to ask about my health. 7. But you've called for money 43 times. The numbers landed in the air like a verdict. "The arrangement was always meant to be built on love and respect," I said evenly. "Once those disappeared, so did the money. Simple economics." Nora's voice broke the silence. "You can't just abandon your family because your feelings got hurt." I looked directly at her, the woman who'd never held a job, who had no problem spending my money on luxury handbags while treating me like furniture. "I'm not abandoning anyone, Nora. I'm simply asking for the courtesy I've always extended to you. Acknowledgement, gratitude, basic human decency. If that's too much to expect, then perhaps we need to reevaluate what family means." Michael leaned forward, his voice softening into that wheedling tone he'd perfected as a child whenever he wanted something. "Mom, we'll do better. We'll call more, visit more. But we need that money. The house, the kids' schools, everything depends on it." "Everything you think you've built depends on my generosity," I corrected sharply. "And generosity requires gratitude, not entitlement." I smoothed down my sweater and stood. "I'm going to make you both a proposition." Walking to the window, I watched the busy street below. People rushed back and forth like ants, each with their own pressing tasks, much like Michael and Nora scrambling to protect their comforts. I turned back. "Here's my offer. You have 30 days to prove to me that I am more than your personal ATM. And I don't mean frantic calls or panicked visits. I mean genuine interest in me as a human being." Michael and Nora exchanged a glance, calculation flashing in their eyes. Already scheming, already thinking how best to stage this. "What exactly does that mean?" Nora asked carefully. "It means remembering dates without reminders, asking about my health, my day, my interests, treating me like family, not a funding source, including me in conversations instead of talking around me, respecting the woman who has kept you afloat." I sat back down, savoring how, for once, they were hanging on my every word. "If, after 30 days, I feel like I'm valued as a person, then we'll talk about resuming some support, not what you had before, something far more limited." Michael's face brightened instantly. "We can do that, Mom. Absolutely." I raised one finger. "But if I detect even the faintest hint of manipulation, if this feels staged just to turn the money spigot back on, the offer is permanently withdrawn, and I do mean permanently." Nora's composure cracked. "But what about the meantime? The mortgage, the cars, the tuition?" "You'll do what millions of families do," I said smoothly. "Live within your means. Michael has a good salary. You could downsize, change schools, sell a car, or Nora, you could even get a job." The word job seemed to sting her like a slap. She'd never worked a day since marrying my son. The very thought looked unbearable to her. "You're being cruel," she whispered. "Cruel? No, honest about what this relationship has become." I rose again, signaling that our conversation was finished. 30 days, starting now, And keep in mind, I've had 5 years to perfect my ability to tell real emotion from rehearsed performances. Don't insult me by faking it." They left wordlessly, Nora trembling with rage, Michael stunned and hollow. After they were gone, I poured myself a glass of wine, settled into my chair, and allowed a small smile that the next 30 days were going to be fascinating. The very next morning, the calls began. No longer frantic demands, but sugar-coated performances worthy of a Broadway stage. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in to see how you're feeling today." Michael's voice dripped with artificial sweetness. "We never ask about your health enough." I nearly laughed as I stirred my lunch. In 5 years, he had never asked about my health unless it was a warm-up to a money request. "I'm fine, Michael. How thoughtful of you to ask." "Great. And hey, I was thinking maybe we could do lunch this week, just the two of us, like old times." Old times. When exactly had we ever had regular lunch dates? I couldn't recall a single occasion where Michael suggested spending time alone with me, without Nora or the kids as buffers. Still, I smiled and said, "That sounds lovely," curious to see just how far they'd push this performance. "Perfect. And Mom," Michael continued, "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, that we haven't appreciated you enough. You're right. We've been terrible." The delivery was so rehearsed it was almost insulting, but I played along. "I appreciate you saying that, dear." After he hung up, I checked my watch. 47 minutes later, the phone rang again. To my surprise, it was Emma. My 14-year-old granddaughter had never initiated a call to me in her life. Our interactions were usually limited to one-word answers at dinner when I asked her questions. "Hi, Grandma Dorothy. I just wanted to tell you about my day at school." Her words came out stiff, like she was reading flashcards. Poor child, clearly coached by her parents. "That's wonderful, Emma. Tell me all about it." She rattled off a cheerful monologue about her classes, her teachers, her friends, every detail drenched in exaggerated enthusiasm for her beloved grandmother. It was heartbreaking. Not because she was lying, but because the charade highlighted how little we truly knew each other. Michael and Nora had turned their daughter into a pawn in their desperate game. When she finished, I said softly, "Sweetheart, you don't have to do this." "Do what, Grandma?" "Pretend you're excited to talk to me because your parents told you to call." Silence. Then her voice, smaller, more real. "Dad said you were mad, that you wouldn't be our grandma anymore if we didn't try harder." Those two had actually frightened their children to manipulate me. "Emma, listen carefully," I told her. "I will always be your grandmother. No matter what happens between me and your parents, that will never change. Do you understand?" "Yes, Grandma." "Good. Now, do you really want to talk to me, or would you rather go do whatever 14-year-olds usually do?" She giggled, her real self peeking through. "Can I go? I have homework." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Grandma." And just like that, the manipulation campaign had officially begun. Day 5 brought flowers. A massive bouquet of white roses and lilies arrived at my door, complete with a card. "Thinking of you always. Love, Michael and Nora." Flowers. From them. I'd never received so much as a single stem before. Not for my birthday, not on Mother's Day, not even when Robert died. But now, when the money mattered, suddenly they were thoughtful enough to drop $200 on a flashy display. I set them on the dining table and waited for the inevitable follow-up call. Within an hour, it came. "Hi, Mom. Did you get our little surprise?" Nora's voice was sticky sweet. "They're lovely. Thank you," I replied. "I just wanted you to know how much we appreciate everything you've done for us. I know I haven't always been the best daughter-in-law, but I want to change that." The best daughter-in-law? This was the same woman who hadn't spoken more than 2 polite sentences to me in 2 years, except for snide remarks about my clothes or cooking. "That's very kind of you to say, Nora." "I was wondering, would you like to go shopping this weekend? Maybe get our nails done? Have a girls' day?" A girls' day. with the woman who once told Michael I was too needy for calling during a hurricane to check if they were safe. I smiled to myself. I'll think about it. By day 8, a new offering arrived. A handwritten letter from Jake, my 12-year-old grandson. The penmanship was unusually neat, proof he'd been forced to rewrite it several times. Dear Grandma Dorothy, it began, I have been thinking about how awesome you are and how I don't tell you enough. You are the best grandma in the world, and I love you so much. I hope we can hang out more and do fun things together. Love, Jake. The letter was sweet on the surface, but it reeked of parental coaching. Jake had never in his life called anything awesome, and certainly never shown interest in hanging out with me. That evening, I called Michael. The letter from Jake was very touching, I said. Oh, that was all his idea, Michael replied quickly. He's just been feeling guilty about not being closer to you. Michael, stop, please. My voice was flat. I know you pushed him to write that letter, just like you pushed Emma to call me. Silence. Then, Mom, I don't know what you... Stop. Just stop. My patience had snapped. If you really want to rebuild this relationship, it has to be based on honesty, not staged performances, not manipulations, not using your children as props. We're trying to show you we care, he protested. No, I corrected. You're trying to prove you can follow a script when money is at stake. That's not the same thing. I hung up, my whole body drained. This wasn't what I'd hoped for. Instead of seeing real change, I was watching them sink deeper into their lies. Still, I had promised 30 days, and I intended to honor my word. I just didn't know how much longer I could tolerate their amateur theatrics. 2 weeks into their little act, everything shifted. I was having lunch with my friend Margaret at our favorite cafe when she leaned across the table. I saw Nora at the country club, she said carefully. She was telling people you'd had a mental breakdown. The porcelain cup rattled in my hand as I set it back on the saucer. What? She said you've been acting erratic since Robert died, that you were making reckless financial decisions, and... Margaret hesitated. That they might need to have you evaluated for competency. Her words hit me like a physical blow. While sending me flowers and love notes, they were simultaneously laying a trap to declare me unfit. Margaret, are you absolutely certain? She met my eyes. Dorothy, I've known you 30 years. You're the sharpest woman I know. But Nora was very convincing. Several women nodded along with her story. I sat through the rest of lunch in a haze. When I got home, I immediately called James Richardson. James, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Has anyone contacted you about my mental state or financial competence? A long pause. Dorothy, I probably shouldn't say this, but yes. Michael called last week. He claimed he was worried about some questionable financial choices you'd made. He asked about the process for having someone evaluated for competency. My hands shook. And what did you tell him? That you're completely sound of mind, that any evaluation would be a waste of everyone's time. But Dorothy, the fact he even asked, you know what it means. After I hung up, I sat staring at those white roses still sitting on my dining table. Every petal now looked like a lie. Every delicate bloom was part of a scheme to paint me as unstable when I inevitably rejected their charade. They weren't trying to win me back. They were manufacturing evidence that they were the caring, patient family of an irrational old woman who'd cut them off without reason. The realization should have devastated me. Instead, I felt a cold, precise fury, the kind I hadn't touched since I was young enough to fight dirty. They wanted a game? Fine, but they'd forgotten I'd been playing longer, and I was far, far better at it. I spent the weekend plotting. By Monday morning, I knew my first move. I called James and asked him to arrange a full mental competency evaluation with Manhattan's most respected neuropsychologist. Dorothy, you don't need to, James protested gently. Yes, I do, I cut in. When this is over, I want documentation that I'm of sound mind and capable of making my own financial decisions. Next, I called Michael. Mom, how are you feeling today? He asked, his fake cheerfulness wearing thin. Actually, Michael, I've been thinking about our conversation, I said slowly. And I've decided you're right. Right about what? About resuming the financial arrangements. I've been too harsh, too emotional. I miss our family dinners. I miss being part of your lives. I want to fix this. The relief in his voice was immediate. Mom, that's wonderful. I knew you'd come around. You're such a loving, generous person. We'll have dinner this Friday, all of us, including Emma and Jake. I want to apologize properly and talk about moving forward. Nora will be so relieved. She's been worried sick about you. I'll bet she has, I thought. That afternoon, I made another call, this time to Patricia Chen, a private investigator James had recommended years ago during Robert's messy business disputes. Mrs. Patterson, she said, what do you need from me? I want everything on Michael and Nora's finances, bank accounts, debts, assets, spending, and check if they've been meeting with attorneys recently. Something about their behavior doesn't add up. Patricia already had a starting file from years earlier, so it didn't take her long. The updated report arrived Thursday morning, and it was even worse than I'd imagined. Michael and Nora were in deep financial trouble. Beyond the obvious costs I'd been covering, they had enormous credit card balances. Nora's shopping addiction was far more severe than I'd realized. They still owed on both cars, had taken out a second mortgage, and were even behind on Jake's tuition. But the most damning find was a hidden bank account. For 2 years, they'd been funneling the money I gave them through it, depositing and withdrawing in large sums before paying bills. Why bother unless they were laying a trail? The answer came in the form of documents Patricia uncovered. Financial planning paperwork showing they'd been working with an attorney to establish guardianship over my assets, and it hadn't started recently. It began right after Robert's funeral, when I was drowning in grief and writing large checks just to feel less alone. They'd been scheming for 5 years. The gradual distance, the growing demands, the little cruelties. All of it was part of a narrative, the overly generous but unstable widow who needed protection from her own poor choices. I thought I'd been teaching them a lesson about respect. In reality, they'd been playing a far more dangerous game. Friday dinner was going to be one to remember. That evening, I sat at the head of their dining table, watching them perform their most polished act of affection yet. They'd pulled out the fine china, lit candles, and set the stage like a picture-perfect family gathering. Emma and Jake seemed genuinely happy to see me, one bright spot in this circus of false warmth. "Mom, you look wonderful," Nora gushed, her smile brittle. "That dress is so flattering." I was wearing the same black dress from Robert's funeral. She'd once complimented it sincerely, back when she was still pretending to like me. "Thank you, dear. You look lovely as always." Michael raised his wine glass. A toast. To family, to forgiveness, and to Mom, for being the most loving, generous woman we know. "To Grandma!" Emma and Jake chimed in together, their enthusiasm real enough to make my heart ache. We got through appetizers and the main course with their performance at full tilt. They asked about my health, my hobbies, my holiday plans. They laughed at my stories, admired my jewelry, and treated me like the beloved family matriarch they'd never actually considered me to be. It was a flawless performance. If I hadn't already seen the script, I might have believed every syllable. After dessert, I stood and cleared my throat. "I have something I want to say to all of you." Michael and Nora leaned forward, faces bright with the expectation that I'd break down and beg them to restore the flow of funds. They'd rehearsed that ending. "These past 2 weeks have been revealing," I began. "Michael, your sudden concern about my health has been, well, touching. Nora, your offer to take me shopping was thoughtful. And children, your letters and calls have been very sweet." Their anticipation swelled. You could practically see the relief. It's made me realize how much I've been missing, how vital it is to be truly present in each other's lives. Michael nodded eagerly, as if I'd given him permission to continue. Exactly, he said. That's what we're trying to prove, which is why I've taken steps to be more involved in managing our affairs. I met with James Richardson to review the family trust documents. Nora's smile faltered for a fraction. I also had a psychological evaluation, I added, letting the words hang in the air. A full assessment. Clean bill of mental health. Michael went pale. I reached into my purse and laid Patricia's report on the table, then watched the color drain from both their faces. Did you know it's illegal to pursue financial guardianship through deceit? I asked quietly. James flagged your planning documents as deeply troubling. Nora sprang up, chair scraping the floor. I don't know what you think you found, she began, but I cut her off. I set the files between us and spoke with calm precision. 5 years of paperwork showing a separate bank account, repeated withdrawals of funds I supplied, and documents indicating you were cultivating witnesses to testify about my supposed erratic behavior. Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. Mom, it's not what it looks like. It looks like fraud. It looks like elder abuse, I said. It looks like two people who decided it was easier to take from me than to support themselves. Emma and Jake stared at their parents with open, horrified eyes. I steeled myself and laid out the consequences. Here's what's going to happen. You will vacate this house by the end of the month, the house I purchased, which means I can remove you. You will find employment. You will adjust your lifestyle and live within your means. And if either of you attempts to contact me again to manipulate or coerce me, I will press criminal charges. James assures me we have ample evidence. I paused, letting the finality settle over them. Then, with the smallest smile, I added, Oh, and I am changing my will. The entire estate will now be donated to charity. I watched the comprehension and regret wash across Michael's face. Congratulations, I said, voice even. Your greed just cost you $47 million. The number landed like a judgment. The drive home afterwards was the gentlest I'd felt in years. For the first time since Robert died, I sensed real freedom. Some lessons are expensive. Watching my son learn that respect can't be bought was worth every penny. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.